All right, everyone. It is 12:32, so I think I'm going to take our welcome screen down here and we can get started. Give me just one moment to stop sharing. Thank you. There we are. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Just Zero's Waste-Free Future Summit. My name is Kevin Boudris. I'm the Deputy Director at Just Zero, and I'm so grateful to all of you for joining us for this year's Waste-Free Future Summit. This is the very first session of our 2025 summit, and in this session, we'll have a keynote address from investigative journalist and author Alden Wicker, who's here with us today. Alden is going to be talking with us all about the environmental and health impacts of fossil fuel-derived textiles production and fast fashion. We're so thankful that Alden has joined us for the keynote address, and I'm personally very excited to hear from her today. But first, before we get started with the keynote address, I want to kick off with a few housekeeping notes, and I'm also going to share a few words about our work at Just Zero and what we try to do here every year in our Waste-Free Future Summit. I'll do my best to be quick because I know we all want to hear from Alden, and that certainly includes myself as well. So first, those few housekeeping notes. I just want to let everyone know that this event is being recorded as an FYI, and we'll be sharing these recordings after the fact with folks who have registered. I also want to let you know that after Alden gives the keynote address, we're going to be having a question and answer session. Please use the Q&A feature here in Zoom Events to ask any questions that you have throughout. You do not have to wait till the end. Share those questions as they come up, and we'll try to get to as many of the questions as possible when we're doing the Q&A portion of the session at the end after Alden's remarks. That's it for housekeeping notes right now. And so a little bit about Just Zero and about the summit itself. Here at Just Zero, it's our mission to work with community members, advocates, and lawmakers all across the country to help them implement just and equitable policy solutions to climate damaging and toxic production, consumption, and disposal practices. We work alongside and empower the folks who are doing the work in their communities to implement zero waste solutions every day to our waste crisis. We group all of our work into four overarching projects, four buckets of priorities that together we believe provide a path forward to address our waste crisis. These projects are, number one, preventable waste. These are our policy solutions that we believe can help reduce, divert, and eliminate waste that frankly shouldn't ever exist in the first place. Things like single-use plastics, excess packaging, and wasted food. Our second project we call corporate pollution. This is our work to hold powerful industries accountable for the trash that they create through policies that require them to bear the costs of their own waste and also to redesign their products and packaging. Our third project we call zero waste systems. This is where we work with communities directly to build the comprehensive programs that put non-toxic reuse, reduction, recycling, and composting programs in place in communities every day. Our fourth and final project is healthy environments. This is where we partner with residents and local leaders to stop harmful facilities and practices and instead prioritize safer alternatives. Across all of this work, we lean heavily on education, policy tools, and community engagement in a way that puts communities, their needs, and their zero waste priorities first. It is our prime directive in our work at Just Zero to put what communities believe their zero waste priority should be first. We start with what do you and your community want to get done to reduce, to divert, to eliminate trash? And what do you think you can get done knowing the political realities of where you live better than any outside experts ever could? We start with that in all of our work. Those three core pillars of how we do this work, again, that's the education, the policy, and the community engagement, are really what this summit, our Waste-Free Future Summit, is all about. We're here to learn from experts like Alden, from the many other panelists and speakers that are going to be visiting us across these 3 days at the summit. And we're also here to learn from each other. We're here to talk about policy proposals and policy solutions and the types of tools that can empower us all to pursue those policy solutions in our communities. And we're also here to engage with one another, to network, to connect, and to keep building this web of folks all across the country who are working on zero waste solutions. Now, when it comes to connecting and networking, we've added a few things to the summit this year compared to last year to really boost the engagement opportunities and the connection opportunities. I'm going to talk about some of those networking forward sessions later today after Alden speaks. And I also want to flag that when you enter the lobby for this Waste Free Future Summit through the Zoom events platform, there's also an opportunity there to chat, use a virtual chat with Just Zero staff members and the panelists and experts and other attendees at the conference. We're trying to make this as connective and interactive as possible this year. Now, across the 6 different sessions that we're putting on at the summit this year through the next 3 days, we'll hopefully use the summit to provide a platform for inspiring conversations, for practical solutions, and for those powerful community connections among us all. Enough of all that for now. That's enough of the introduction to Just Zero and the summit. We want to get down to the main event because, again, we are really so thankful and honored that Alden has joined us here today to give the keynote address. Just a quick introduction. Alden Wicker is an investigative journalist and the author of To Die For: How Toxic Fashion is Making Us Sick and How We Can Fight Back, which won the Society of Environmental Journalists Rachel Carson Book Award, and which you can find either at your local bookstore or through bookshop.org, which also supports local bookstores. Alden writes about healthy fashion and homes for her platform, EcoCult, on Substack. She's contributed to publications including the New York Times, BBC, Wired, Fox, and Vogue. And she's also appeared on NPR's Fresh Air, the BBC, and NBC, among others. Alden has done more than probably anybody else to research and uncover the unsettling truths and environmental impacts that come from fossil fuel-derived textiles and fast fashion. Thank you again for being here, Alden. A quick reminder once more to everyone that you can put any questions that you have for Alden through the Q&A feature in Zoom, and we'll try to get to those during the question and answer session. And with that, Alden, I'll turn it over to you. Please take it away. And thanks once again for being here.
Thank you so much, Kevin, for that wonderful introduction. Hi, everybody. In addition to that, I'm actually coming to you from my office in Vermont, where I work as the communications director for Vermont Center for Eco Studies, which is a wildlife and biodiversity research nonprofit. So if you like birds, bees, and butterflies, you should definitely check that out as well. You can see I'm very office setting. So I'm just going to share my screen here. There we go. Technology. Okay. Thanks everybody for your patience. So yeah, I'm here today to talk about toxic fashion, its history, what it's doing to us today, and what we can do about it. And so I'll start here. I've been writing about sustainable fashion since probably 2011. And I want to take you to 2019 when the world was very different. I was a freelance journalist. I was a blogger. I had a very successful blog, EcoCult. I also was an influencer. So as you can see here, I'm like, oh, I'm just going to educate people about fashion sustainability, and that will be my role. And once people, learn and understand, they will shop better. We can shop our way out of this problem. It was the every dollar you spend is a vote for the world you want to see era. It was also visiting factories in Bangladesh and Vietnam and, small weaving units and everywhere from Peru to Jaipur. But, what was happening then is that nothing seemed to be getting better. Sustainable fashion was so trendy and everybody was talking about it, but it just all seemed to be getting faster and worse for the planet. And there was more of it. And I think part of the problem was that unlike food or personal care products, or even travel, like you just couldn't see the impact of of fashion on our own lives. It was, you were talking about an invisible gas that goes up into the atmosphere. We're talking about, landfills in countries that most Americans or Westerners will never visit. We were talking about garment workers and rivers that you will never see for yourself. And so it was just really hard to convince people that what clothing you wear actually has an impact on your own life. And that big disconnect was starting to really bother me. But at the time, the understanding was, well, you're not eating your clothing and you're not rubbing it into your skin. So, and there didn't seem to be anybody talking about that there could be toxic chemicals in clothing. And that all changed one day when a radio show called me and said, "Hey, Delta Airlines attendants are suing Lands' who made their uniforms, saying these uniforms made them very, very sick." And you can see some pictures from the Facebook group. We're talking crusty eyes, you know, uh, losing hair, skin rashes so bad that they bled, also extreme fatigue whenever the airline attendants would get on the plane. So flu-like symptoms, so getting so sick that they just couldn't work, menstrual issues, palpitating heart. And this wasn't the first time this had happened. This happened at Alaska Airlines in 2012. It happened at American Airlines next. Those were both with Twin Hill as a maker of the uniforms. It happened at Southwest Airlines with still another brand of uniforms. So something systemic was happening. And this raised some questions for me. One, what was in these uniforms that was making these flight attendants so sick? And I would eventually find out the answers to that question throughout my reporting on that process. And two, if this is happening to flight attendants, is this also happening to normal folks? And the answer to that question is yes. The flight attendants could figure it out because they would get these new uniforms that had all these performance qualities, bright dyes, flame retardant, wrinkle free, stain proof. And they would start wearing them all the same day. They spent a lot of time together, hanging out in crash pads at the back of the plane. And they started talking to each other and saying, "Oh, you have a persistent cough? Like I have a rash. I'm losing my hair." And it became pretty unavoidable what was happening. Yet still, the corporations responsible for it were trying to deny it, gaslight them, tell them that maybe they're going through menopause. But eventually it became too big to ignore. A regular person who has, a few pieces or a lot of pieces that are toxic in some way probably wouldn't understand why they have persistent skin problems, why these other symptoms are happening, because they're wearing something different every day. There's no clear before and after they got a certain product. And they don't have other people to compare that before and after to. This is Heather Poole. She was a huge advocate for American Airlines flight attendants and all flight attendants who were going through this. And she spoke to me. This is her in the hospital after one of her flights where she had to leave. Um, and and she sort of sent me down this path. Um, she's actually back flying now, which is really great after this huge fight, because she likes being a flight attendant. So anyway, let me go back to the beginning of toxic fashion. Fashion has been toxic for a very, very long time. This is a book by Allison Matthews David. It has a lot of primary research where she went through physical archives to find all of this history of fashion being deadly physically with toxins, being super flammable or boning that would, not let you breathe. And so a lot of my research on the history of toxic fashion came from her. And so you've heard of the Mad Hatter. This is because mercury was used to felt rabbit fur into men's hats. Mercury poisoning is really hard to pinpoint. It manifests as a lot of weird symptoms, and it can take a long time to figure out what's going on. Arsenic green was a really popular dye that was invented in the Victorian age. Everybody wanted green dresses. There were reports of women, like big balls where women were whirling around and green arsenic dust was coming off of their dresses, and everybody would just feel like crap at the end of the night. Or they would get, pimples all over their forehead from wearing these arsenic green wreaths. One poor young woman who was working in these head wreath workshops ended up dying on the job, which was a huge scandal. Of course, nobody actually was held accountable for it. And then we have the invention of petrochemical dyes. And now, what a lot of people don't know is that almost all of the chemical manufacturers, the pharmaceutical manufacturers that you've heard of today got their start manufacturing textile dyes. The very first commercial product created out of a chemical reaction where someone took coal tar waste and sort of mashed these different chemical compounds together to create something new. They invented mauve, the dye mauve, and then it led to this explosion of color. And even back then, people were aware that this wasn't great. There were reports of reactions, rashes, and stripes because people were wearing striped coral socks. Um, there were people who reported falling sick and some even dying when they put a nitrobenzene based shoe blacking on their canvas shoes and would go out dancing or sweating in them. It was a problem, and so this reaction or this playbook developed from the fashion industry where they would say, that's not true. That's not true. It's not us. It's not a big deal. We're going to pay some chemists to like prove it's, pay some science doctors to say it's not true. And then we're going to like quietly phase out the worst clear offenders. But no legislation was ever passed. Very little legislation was ever passed. I think Connecticut said you can't use mercury anymore. The state of Connecticut, there's, I think it was Chicago that said you can't, there has to be warning signs about nitrobenzene blacking, but shoe blacking. But essentially, just quietly, like voluntarily get it out of the way and like, let's all move on and not talk about it. And the problem with petrochemical dyes and finishes is that it does not all petrochemical products are toxic. Not all natural products are non-toxic. You have lead and arsenic. These are natural materials, but the sheer proliferation and number of petrochemical products that could be made and released into the wild without health testing or safety testing is just enormous. And so this brought us to also the age of chromium tanning. There's a place called Gloversville in upstate New York, and they still are dotted with Superfund sites. So these are sites where the federal government says, hey, this is so toxic that nothing can be done here or built here until it's remediated because of chromium leather tanning and them putting it right into the creek. And people still have a lot of illness there. You can read more about that in my book. It's very, very sad. And then we get into this woman, honestly, is a badass. She was a USDA chemist, research chemist before, this was really an opportunity that was given to women. And she was tasked with saving cotton because housewives no longer wanted to spend all their time ironing cotton. So they were buying a lot of polyester stuff. And so she came up with a formaldehyde-based permanent press finish to put on cotton so that you didn't have to iron it. And that sort of brought us into the age of putting chemical performance finishes on all sorts of fabrics, not just cotton, not just linen, but synthetic fabrics as well. Now, it became clear after some research that people working in these permanent press factories were at high risk for several types of cancer and especially leukemia, especially at low levels. And then we have PVC. So PVC is known as one of the most toxic plastics out there. And it became super popular in the sort of the space age for, all sorts of things, but you still see it today labels as vegan leather, or you might see it in any clear plastic shoe, jelly shoes for kids, raincoats, like very cheap leather products, like mini skirts. They're usually made from PVC. And the VC in PVC is vinyl chloride. This is the chemical that was in that train derailment and explosion in Ohio a few years back. It's extremely toxic and it off gases out of PVC for its lifetime. It's kind of responsible for that new car smell as well. There's no safe limit of vinyl chloride exposure. And PVC also almost always comes with phthalates as well, which are endocrine disrupting chemicals. And those tend to leach out of PVC as well, especially if you're talking about things like jelly shoes or a mini skirt where you're sweating in it, and that's taking the chemicals, these hazardous chemicals like phthalates, out of the plastic and onto your skin. So that brings us to today, where the majority of textile products are synthetic, mostly polyester, but you also have other synthetics such as nylon and acrylic. Polyamide is nylon, and acrylic and other things like that. And so if you go out to a regular store, from luxury to fast fashion, and you pick up something random, it will most likely be synthetic. So there are clues that something is wrong. And I'm not attributing all of this to fashion, but in globally, but especially in the United States, but globally as well, we're seeing the increase of chemical sensitivity. You might also know this as mast cell activation syndrome. You might know this as, you know, I can't do strong smells, or I have an asthma attack if I smell a strong synthetic fragrance or a chemical smell. Eczema is on the rise, especially in children. Cancer rates are on the rise, especially in young folks. Autoimmune disease is on the rise, and we're in a fertility crisis. And all of these, researchers are starting to come around to, the fact that this is not just lifestyle factors. This isn't just smoking, sleeping, exercising. It is beyond this, to the environmental exposure that we're having through a variety of routes to hazardous chemicals, all of these. And so as I was researching, and even when I started, the book was done, written, coming out, and I was starting to talk about it with the press, and they would ask me like, well, is this sounds scary? Should I be scared? And I did not want to fearmonger. I did not want to be, it was very important to me not to be put in the like fear-mongery health influencer box. I didn't want to be dismissed. And so I sort of played it safe. I said, well, if you don't have a chronic illness that you're managing, if you don't have skin problems, if you don't have a history of cancer in your family, or a personal history of cancer, if you're not trying to get pregnant, or you don't have currently have kids, then it's not a big deal. And it just, the list kept on getting longer and longer and longer, right? Like, of the people who are affected by this, and the people who should be concerned about what they wear on their body. And I excluded myself from all of those things. I was like, I don't have kids, like I don't have, chronic illness, thank God. And so I was just sort of like, but personally, like I don't wear synthetics very often because, they make me itch. And then I realized, as we came out of the pandemic and I started wearing hard pants again instead of just sweatpants all the time, that, oh my gosh, it was causing my body, these synthetics, especially if I wore them to hot yoga, they would cause me to break out. And so I said, oh my gosh, this is affecting everyone. This is affecting everyone. This is the thing where, if you've tried eating healthfully, and you're managing a chronic illness or skin problems, and you figured, you have a pretty clean home, and you're using clean beauty products, and you're using non-toxic, personal care products, like, don't forget about fashion. Fashion is a really important part of this. And so this list here is just like everything that's been found in fashion, right? You pretty much have all the hits: solvents and vinyl chloride and endocrine disruptors, reproductive toxins, allergens, carcinogens, VOCs, skin sensitizers, heavy metals, neurotoxins. Like, it's all in there, because fashion can have tens of thousands of different chemicals used in it. And there's very little that you can't use in fashion. Okay, also garment workers. Obviously, I want to say I went to India because I wanted to speak to garment workers who are touching and dealing with these these pieces of fashion as they're being made. Because if it's affecting consumers, then it's definitely affecting them. And it was immediate. Like, the first group of women I talked to, one of them pulled up her sari and showed me the scars, and the current skin issues she had from working in a synthetic clothing factory in Tamil Nadu in India, in a place called Tirupur. These pictures are from an incredible report put together by a science teacher with the help of her female students in her science class, where they went around and they just recorded down all of these facts around what the fashion industry and the dye houses were doing to Tirupur. So you have a well, a local farmer showing him their well, which is black. There's a local reservoir, and the little girl on the right went swimming in that reservoir. And this is what happened to her skin. Tirupur has been cleaned up a little bit because they now have legislation that requires every dye house to put things through a water purification system. It's not perfect, but it is helping a lot. Unfortunately, I think the damage has been done. You can't drink groundwater in Tirupur. It has to be piped in from the outside. Okay, again, not just woo-woo wellness stuff, and I will tell you why. Okay, so the first thing is there was a Harvard study where the researchers were doing wide-scale health surveys of several large airlines, and they did them prior to 2012. And so the industrial hygienists who work for the union representing Alaska Airlines flight attendants, who, as you remember, were the first airline to introduce these new toxic uniforms, said, "Hey, can you come back and do another survey?" And what the researchers concluded is that all of these symptoms, such as blurred vision, sinus congestion, ear pain, sore throat, cough, chemical sensitivity, irritated skin, all these symptoms more or less doubled after the introduction of the uniforms. And they concluded that the uniforms had made these flight attendants sick. And just to note, these are acute symptoms. Long-term illness, such as autoimmune disease, cancer. At the flight attendants I talked to during the course of reporting the book, one of them was diagnosed with lupus. Another was diagnosed with skin cancer on a place where the sun does not shine. So it's hard to link clothing to a specific thing like this, but they believe that the uniforms precipitated these eventual chronic illnesses. Every time researchers actually do look into clothing, they end up finding some pretty gnarly stuff. So in the past, researchers would go and they would source children's products or children's school uniforms or adult products or counterfeit products, and they would sort of test for the worst things, right? They would look for certain heavy metals, they would look for PFAS, and they would find it. Just last week, there was a study that came out of Spain where they went and bought infant clothing, and they tested it for everything. So they did a type of non-targeted analysis where they just did like what chemical signatures are showing up here and then matching them to the literature. And so using non-targeted analysis and not just looking for what they expected to find. And this was both used clothing and new clothing, and also after a quick wash. They found pharmaceuticals such as opioids and antidepressants. They found biocides like DEET, and then the usuals like phthalates and synthetic fragrances. So the scientists basically said in sciencey terms, like, we have no idea where this clothing has been. Like, we don't understand. But I kind of understand because the supply chain is so complex and things bop around from factory to factory and country to country so much, and then they're put on ships and shipped over. Like, we truly don't know where this clothing has been. And there are things that are put in purposefully, and there are things that are accidental contamination. And you should always wash your clothing before you wear it at least once. But this shows that like even that is not enough with our current system. And this is infant clothing in the European Union, which has stronger protections. Research out of Duke showing that the types of dyes used on synthetic fashion are skin and immunosensitizers. And also, allergists will tell you that if you go in and you say, "I need to get an allergy test, I'm having chronic issues," they will give you a patch test. They'll select 80 commonly known substances that might give you a reaction. They put them all on your back. And then you go back every 24 hours to see what you have a reaction. And they usually include disperse dyes, which are the dyes used on synthetic fashion, because they are known sensitizers. American Airlines flight attendants, yay, they won their lawsuit against Twin Hill. So their accounts were affirmed by a jury. And anecdotally, I've had people reach out to me after reading my book and say, hey, I had chronic skin issues. I would go to the dermatologist. They would ask me what I was, what lotion I was using, or if I was wearing fragranced detergents. And then they would put me on a steroid because they didn't know. And this is Rachel Silverstein. She actually read my book. She stopped wearing synthetic clothing 6 months before her wedding. And because of that, she was able to wear this backless gown to her wedding. So current protections. At the federal level, we only ban 3 substances for use in fashion and only in children's products. And Customs and Border Protection, they're pretty sure they don't have the capacity to check everything. And so as long as it's from a legitimate company, like and not a counterfeit, they'll just sort of wave it through. At the state level, California's Prop 65 has actually been extremely effective. It doesn't ban hazardous chemicals in consumer products, but it does say that if there's a possibility they're in there, you have to label it. And so, especially in apparel, where people don't like buying apparel that says it has reproductive toxins and carcinogens in it. This has caused a lot of consumer brands to check, test, and work with their suppliers to make sure things are cleaner. And there's been studies out of Silent Spring Institute showing that these substances that have been listed, actually their levels have been going down in Americans at large, and especially Californians' blood over the past decade. We also have legislation in Washington State, Maine, and Vermont. And especially PFAS. So New York and California have banned PFAS in everyday apparel, and performance apparel such as outdoor gear is coming soon. This is super exciting because California and New York are huge markets. So anything that they do, it will apply across the United States. Minnesota and Vermont have also gotten on this train. Yay, Vermont. So that's where we are. And people always ask me, like, what can you do? So there are things you can do to reduce your and your family's exposure to hazardous chemicals. None of these things by themselves will do it. You're going to have to layer them on top of each other because, unfortunately, fashion doesn't come with an ingredient list. And I'll tell you more about that. But essentially, you can join some of these advocacy organizations that are specifically working on hazardous chemicals in consumer products. Safer States is actually under the auspices of Toxic Free Future. And I have an interview on my Substack with somebody from Safer States talking about how effective it is to go state by state on this thing, especially with the federal government we have now. So you can avoid ultra fast fashion and knockoffs. If you've never heard of the product, if it's being sold on Amazon with a gibberish name, if it's from Shein, or another ultra fast fashion brand, don't risk it. These brands are basically they're factories that H&M would never work with because they're so sketchy, and they're just advertising straight to you and shipping straight to you. So truly, it is a very risky and dangerous proposition for many reasons to source from these ultra fast fashion brands. Find brands that you can trust. You can find lists at ecocult.com. We also, on my Substack, ecocult.substack.com, we put out regular shopping guides. I just like to show sort of like the ones that are easy to order from that you might surprise you. Levi's and United Colors of Benetton and H&M and Vans, they have really strong chemical management policies. So if you're thinking, I can't afford this, yes, you can. Then you have the super clean brands for people who are managing more intense, who are managing health issues or react to, are sensitive to chemicals or react to synthetics. So these are the super clean ones. and they are more expensive, but it depends on your priorities and where you want to put your money for this. Look for labels. I like Blue Sign. I also like Okotex. GOTS organic does not mean something is non-toxic by itself. If a brand is using it in combination with knowing their supply chain and only using natural fibers, potentially, but it's actually a pretty easy to gain certification. And I like to tell people that because people always say, "Oh, I'll just buy organic." You can still use petrochemical dyes um, on an organic product. You just, as a factory, you just fill out some paperwork. Nobody ever verifies it. So organic is good for food, for fashion, not so much. Use natural materials whenever possible. So this is what undyed, unfinished cotton looks like. So it includes the usuals, but also people with skin or immuno or chemical sensitivity tend to do well with bamboo rayon, viscose, tencel, lyocell, and merino wool, which is more cashmere-like and softer. Those ones I just named, they are man-made, but they're based on plant products. So they tend to be dyed and finished the same way the natural products are. Anything that has a copyrighted or trademark name to it usually means it's either a synthetic fiber or it is or it has a chemical performance finish. These are used to sell things to mark up the price of products. And a lot of times they're not even that effective. And so you're paying more for a more toxic product that's not as effective. Just go with regular cotton. Wash your new clothes before you wear them. As I said, use unscented detergent. The scented detergents usually include phthalates and a lot of other toxic things. Try to avoid dry cleaning if at all possible. Buy secondhand or swap with your friends. It's a really good way to get high quality natural products from brands that you trust for for an affordable price. And also they've been washed a bunch of times. They've had time to off gas. If it smells like chemicals, don't buy it or send it back. Okay, so systemic solutions. This was my wish list when I first put out the book of like what I would like to see the government do. So fund and empower the EPA, fund and empower the Consumer Product Safety Commission, close the de minimis standard loophole. So that's with any package that was under $800 in value was not checked at the border or subjected to tariffs or taxes. Ban the presence of PFAS, require complete ingredient lists. Right now, only anything under 5% of the total weight of the garment does not have to be listed on the label. So something that is heavily dyed and then finished with PFAS, those wouldn't have to be listed, even though that's 1% or more of the weight of the garment. And require fashion brands to document and share their entire supply chain so they know what's being put on their stuff and where. So how are we doing? Not great. The EPA is being dismantled. The Consumer Product Safety Commission, 2 of its commissioners were fired. The de minimis loophole has been closed. It's been closed in a little bit of a sledgehammery way. So it's been a little bit chaotic, especially for small producers in Europe and Canada or like Etsy sellers. So that's been a little bit difficult. We like don't know what's happening right now, but it has been closed. Ban the presence of PFAS in apparel. That is happening at the state level, even though the current EPA is trying to supersede state authority to ban chemicals. So to be seen. And nobody is requiring fashion brands to document and share their supply chain. There has been legislation proposed in California and New York State, but it doesn't seem to be going anywhere. Okay, so that is it. I would send you to buy my book. I've just given you the basic facts, but the book has, I talked to a lot of people across the political spectrum. This is a bipartisan issue about how chemicals have impacted their lives, about chemical sensitivity or chemical intolerance. I go pretty deep on that. And there's an audio version. And ecocult.com is still up and has a lot of resources, but also you can subscribe to my Substack for more deep dives and shopping guides. So I'm ready for questions.
First off, Alden, thank you. That was really, really amazing and comprehensive. And I think we got a little bit of this in some of the questions in the chat. Also horrifying, but important for all of us to know. And I think it really sheds, oh yeah, you still have your screen share up. Could
Oh
you
yeah, let me
stop the share?
share.
There it is.
Okay.
Thank you, Alden. So much of what you had to say mirrors a lot of what we see across different types of products that are a part of our waste crisis right now. That it's
Yeah.
not just what do we do with this thing at the end of its life when we don't have a use for it? The problem starts at the very beginning. What our products are made out of, what our packaging is made out of, and especially what you're talking about today, what our clothing and our textiles are made out of. And we're never going to solve in any meaningful way these end of life issues regarding like what do we do with these products when we're done with them when they're so toxic from the beginning, from the get-go,
Right.
and they're making us sick and impacting the environment, impacting our health, impacting the climate throughout their lifespan. We've got a lot of really awesome questions in from the chat, so I want to pop through and around as many of them as we can, if that's okay, before we run out of
Yep.
time. I'll probably start with a few different questions that are about some of the specific toxics and a lot of the toxic impacts that you mentioned. One of the first questions we got in from Heather asked if you know anything about clothing being treated with insect repellents,
Mhm.
like DEET or anything like that, prior to being then like packed and shipped in plastic bags.
Yeah. So there I when I was doing some research and talking to some people who work within the supply chain, um, when pesticides show up on clothing, it might be there was one instance, for example, where an unnamed large brand had some, random testing done and they found a pretty noxious pesticide that's not available in the United States. And um, it turns out that a warehouse that was holding the fabric had been in a flood zone, and so they had put like a biocide through the warehouse, and there had been some like contamination in there. There's also they applied pesticides and stuff and fungicides to shipments or round shipments that come from Southeast Asia because it's so hot and buggy there, as well as there's a lot of pesticide application on planes. If you've ever been on a plane where they just like walk up and down when you land on an island, um, or in India or in Australia, well, they do the same thing to shipments to make sure they're not bringing in invasive species. So there's multiple points of contamination in the supply chain where it could come in. It could be before it's packaged, it could be after it's packaged. We just don't know.
Wow. Okay. Thank you. Two related questions that I'm gonna kind of throw at you in a combination here. Eileen asked a question about the Spanish study that you mentioned and whether the chemicals in children's clothing were just on synthetic clothing, or were they also on 100% natural fibers like cotton, wool, or linen?
Oh, that's a really good question, and I need to dive into the study further to answer that question. Overall, synthetic fibers are more likely to have a variety of hazardous chemicals in them and on them, but just because something is natural doesn't mean it's completely safe. Like I said, you need to layer on these different strategies. Um, and so, yeah, and also I will say, on the topic of these different fibers and stuff, H&M and IKEA did a study where they sourced used clothing to see what was showing up on these different um, fibers that they were thinking about potentially recycling, because if you're recycling clothing, you need to make sure that the end product is still conforming to your standards. And they found hazardous chemicals on all of the types of pure fibers, including wool, and cotton and synthetics, but they just found different types.
Sure. So similar question that's from Susan. I guess I'll intro it by saying, we talk when we say synthetic fibers, we think a lot about the plastic-based fibers, the polyester and things like that. Susan asks about fabrics like rayon, viscose, and lyocell, which I may or may not be pronouncing correctly. Uh, she says that she's heard that those fabrics are manufactured with pretty harsh chemicals. Is that the presence of toxics like we see with bioplastics, is it the same for those plant-based manufactured textiles? Do we have the same kind of toxic chemical additive concerns with those?
We do not. So the way man-made cellulosics are, the way bamboo or trees are transformed into a very soft fiber is there's something called carbon disulfide that is used to like sort of break that cellulose down so it can be re-extruded into fibers. Carbon disulfide is very, very toxic. It's also completely used up and 100% gone off of the final product. So it is absolutely a concern for the workers in poorly managed factories. It is not a concern for the final consumer product. Now, do with that information what you will. I would say if you are concerned, if you like bamboo rayon or you like tencel or lyocell, Tencel actually and lyocell are made using a slightly less toxic product process. If you're concerned about that, you should buy Blue Sign certified, or Blue Sign certified would be the best because that indicates that it comes from a factory that takes care to use chemicals safely, safer chemicals safely.
That's great. Thank you. A question related to that from Rebecca, kind of about the eco labels. A good greenwashing question. She asked, some companies have new promotion of eco labels. Is that true or misleading greenwashing? She also asks, is there a directory or list of companies that are safe? I know you listed a few in your presentation.
Mhm.
Is there a resource out there that folks might be able to go to kind of sort through which companies are safer
Mhm.
and which of these labels are trustworthy and maybe which aren't?
Yeah, so if you use your preferred search engine to look up eco cults and eco certifications for fashion. Um, Hopefully someone can find it and post it in the chat. But basically, we have a guide to eco labels for fashion, and I go through which ones you can trust and which you can't. Like I said, Okotex, for the purposes of a non-toxic final consumer product, is one of the best. Blue Sign is also very good. GOTS Organic, not so much, only in combination with other protections. Um, and there's more in there. And then in terms of a list of brands, it's always changing. And so EcoCult does have on my Substack, if you go back through the post there or you look for it in your search engine, EcoCult.substack, there is a guide to affordable mall brands. There's also a few guys on EcoCult, and there's a sustainable shopping page on ecocult.com, and you can go there. Now, I have not updated it in probably more than 6 months, and it's obviously it's changing all the time. Some brands fall out of favor. Like Pack used to be really, really good. Now it's really, really not good. That's not on there. Some brands have gone out of business. So it is changing all the time, but I'm trying to keep up with it. And you subscribe to ecocult.substack.com. We're putting out new particular guides all the time.
Great, thank you. I think we've got time for just one more question before we've got to wrap up, and I'm going to kind of combine the theme of a few questions that I've gotten in now, which kind of looks again, as I mentioned, towards the end of life on some of this, we've gotten some questions in about kind of reuse and recycling and the proliferation of some of these toxics and chemicals throughout that part of the life cycle of these fabrics. Do you have any suggestions or thoughts on how we can make fabric reuse, and upcycling and things like that safer, given the proliferation of all these chemicals?
Such a good question. I mean, I would say on a personal level, you know, follow the guidelines that I presented. Don't upcycle Shein. But on a systemic level, it really is about turning off the tap at the beginning. It's about making it illegal to use PFAS on clothing. It's about, putting the structures in place to check clothing to make sure it's safe. It's about empowering, you know, uh, agencies to protect us. Um, and it's also about supporting your local makers. If you live in a good fiber shed, which is like an area that creates textiles, whether it's alpaca or sheep or hand weaving or knitting, or sewing, all of these different things, like support your local maker because uh not only will it be safer, you're also sort of doing something that has a tangible impact on your community.
That's awesome. Thank you. You mentioned turning off the toxic tap, empowering agencies to protect
Mhm.
us, and supporting the local businesses that are doing this right. I cannot think of three better notes to end on. So again, thank you so much, Alden, for being here with us, for your keynote address, for answering all of these awesome questions. Apologies to folks that we, of course, weren't able to
I
get
know,
to.
so many good questions. I wish I could answer them all.
We will try to do what we can here at Just Zero to maybe kind of compile some of the rest of these questions and see if we can get answers back out to folks kind of using the Zoom events platform in the lobby chat and things like
Okay.
that. And thank you also, Alden, for all of the amazing work that you do on all of this stuff. We really appreciate you, and it's awesome to have you, in this with everyone here together. Thank you again to everyone that joined us today. As I've mentioned before, we truly cannot do this work without all of you, the folks who are tuned in and working on this in their local communities. As I mentioned at the start of this session, it's Just Zero's mission to work alongside community members, advocates, and lawmakers who are working on just and equitable policy solutions to the waste crisis in their local communities. A big part of that work is connecting with and learning with all of you at events like this. So thank you for taking the time today. Thank you for your passion, your thoughtfulness, and everything you do as you do this work in your communities. Before we say goodbye, I just want to quickly share another slide here. Okay, I've got the remainder of the summit schedule up here. Before I say goodbye, I want to quickly review this schedule just so folks know about the other 5 sessions that are coming up at our summit this year. This afternoon at 4 p.m., we're going to have an interactive networking session that we've titled Meet the Movement. At this session, we're going to start with a review of Just Zero's 4 projects, which I mentioned earlier. And then folks are going to have an opportunity to join breakout rooms that are organized around those different projects, where they can talk with Just Zero staff members and importantly, can talk with each other attendees at the summit to talk about what they're working on, share ideas, network, explore how we can work together, all of that great stuff. Tomorrow, we're going to have 2 sessions, starting with Eco in an Echo Chamber at 1 p.m. Eastern. This is going to be a panel event focused on communicating about zero waste. Specifically, our panelists are going to talk about practical tools and fresh perspectives for using social media as a powerful engine for zero waste work and for environmental advocacy more broadly. At 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow, we're going to have From the Ground Up, which is going to be a really interesting session with 6 different advocates from different organizations all around the country who are going to offer some perspective on what they're working on. And then we'll also have another set of breakout sessions where folks can interact one-on-one with all of these different advocates doing great work all around the country. Our final day will be October 30th, this Thursday. We're going to start at noon Eastern Time with the poison pipeline, where we're going to have panelists talking about how our broken systems of production, consumption, and disposal are endangering human health. And then our last session will be at 3 p.m. Eastern Time on Thursday, which is redefining zero waste, where you can hear from Just Zero staff members about where we're going next in our bold, updated approach to transforming the way we think about waste. Please come to any and all of the sessions that interest you during the course of the summit. Take advantage of the virtual lobby and the networking opportunities that we have this year. If you have not signed up for Just Zero's emails, please use the link in the resources tab to sign up for our emails to learn more about the work that we're doing and that many other advocates at different organizations are doing all around the country. Thank you for joining us for this year's summit. Thanks again to Alden. We really appreciate you joining us today and for that awesome keynote address that you gave and answering all these questions. Please have a great day, everyone. Keep up the great work, and we hope to see you all this afternoon. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.